Fantasy football wasn't just a hobby, it was a ritual. Every Friday night like clockwork. 8 of us gathered in my living room. Some wore team jerseys, others brought their lucky draft notebooks or homemade chili. We argued over stats, trash-talked trade decisions, yelled at Thursday night injuries, and debated wide receiver rankings like they were matters of national security. It wasn't about the money. It was about the rhythm, the camaraderie, the strange and sacred bond that came with pretending you were a general manager for 16 weeks a year. And my wife, she was the unofficial hostess. She didn't play, never showed much interest in football, but she liked the energy, said it made the house feel alive. Every week, she'd set out bowls of chips, make pitchers of lemonade or cocktails, and float through the room like a soft breeze, exchanging smiles and jokes with the guys. They loved her, thought she was cool, the chill wife, the one who didn't mind the mess or the noise, the one who remembered everyone's favorite drink. I loved that about her. Or at least, I used to. In the beginning, I didn't notice anything out of place. She was charming, friendly, a little flirty, sure, but nothing overt. I chalked it up to her personality, warm, engaging, magnetic in a way that made people feel seen. If a hand lingered too long on a shoulder, if a laugh was too generous, I told myself she was just being her. She touched people when she talked. That's how she connected. It wasn't a threat, it was just her way. Until my birthday. It landed on a Friday that year. I remember waking up to the smell of her cooking, bacon, cinnamon rolls, that spicy sausage dip we only made for game nights. She smiled when I came downstairs, kissed my cheek, said, "Happy birthday, champ," and handed me a cup of coffee with my favorite mug. Nothing felt off. The guys arrived like usual. Ben brought beer. Curtis brought his laptop. Anthony forgot his phone charger again. We settled in. She made a joke about how we were all emotionally 12 years old when football season started. Everyone laughed. Then, somewhere between the second quarter of a game none of us really cared about and a heated debate about benching a running back who was questionable, something strange happened. 3 of the guys stood up and said they had brought something for the birthday boy, they said, but they didn't hand anything to me. They turned to her. Each pulled out a small gift bag, nothing extravagant. A candle, a bottle of wine, a scarf, things you wouldn't normally give someone else's wife. She looked surprised, flushed, almost, but not confused. "Oh, you guys didn't have to," she said. Ben laughed. "Come on, you make this place fun." Curtis added, "Honestly, you're the only reason we show up on time." Anthony said, "My wife thinks I'm just here for fantasy. But we both know the food's the real MVP." Everyone laughed again, except me. I smiled. Because what else do you do in a moment like that? Your mind doesn't rush to betrayal. It pauses. It hesitates. It tries to explain. I told myself it was harmless. Just appreciation. They were trying to be thoughtful. But then I watched her tuck the gifts away in the cabinet. Not on the table with the other snacks. Out of sight. And I remembered the way she touched Curtis's wrist earlier when he made a joke. The way she stood a little closer to Ben when they were refilling drinks. The text message I glimpsed the week before, Anthony's name. A smiley face. Suddenly, things didn't add up. They overlapped. I looked around the room and realized I had invited everyone in. I had built this ritual. I had made my home their second home. I had praised her for being open and social and supportive. And now, 3 of those men had brought her gifts on my birthday. And she had smiled in that way that wasn't quite surprise. Something in my chest pulled tight. Not a break, a shift. Something had moved beneath the surface. And I knew, without any proof yet, that I needed to start watching. Fantasy football was about to become real. At first, the excuses for the gifts seemed harmless. A candle, because she always made the place smell good. A scarf, because she mentioned being cold last week. A bottle of wine, as thanks for always hosting. They weren't extravagant. That was the trick. They were small enough to pass as thoughtful but personal enough to linger in the air like static. "She just helps out so much." One of them said. "It's nothing, man. Just appreciation, another added. I nodded, smiled, told them not to worry about it, that I appreciated the gesture. But something was wrong, not because of the gifts, but because of the way they looked at her. It wasn't just admiration, it wasn't platonic, it wasn't casual, it was the kind of gaze that lingers half a second too long. And when you've been with someone long enough, you know when others are seeing more of her than you're comfortable with. You know when someone else has crossed the invisible boundary. And worse, you know when she's let them. So I watched. The next game night, I stayed quieter, observed more. I stopped mid-conversation just to see who was looking at who. Curtis sat a little too close. Anthony made her laugh too hard. Ben leaned in too far when she refilled his drink. None of it was damning. None of it was proof. But together, it created a current I couldn't ignore. She started dressing differently. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But then I realized, game night had become a stage. She wore that black bodycon dress, the one she usually saved for date nights, just to hang out in our living room. Her hair was done, nails freshly painted, perfume noticeable. I asked if she was going out later. She said, no, just wanted to feel nice. And yet, the way Ben glanced at her legs as she walked past said it wasn't just about feeling nice. Still, I said nothing, because what do you say to a suspicion that lives only in your own gut? You validate it, quietly. You observe. You collect. I started paying attention to how long she stayed in the room after I left. If I went to grab something from the garage, I'd return a little slower, just in time to hear the sudden shift in tone. A voice raised too cheerily. Laughter that stopped the second I re-entered. She once followed Anthony into the kitchen alone. 10 minutes later, when I walked in, they were on opposite sides of the counter. Nothing inappropriate, nothing caught, just silence that arrived too quickly. After that night, I installed a camera. Discreet, nestled in a bookshelf facing the couch. Low angle, no sound, just motion. I told myself it was for security. But I knew the truth. I placed it where she usually sat. Where she sometimes leaned in to whisper something to Curtis. Where Ben always took the corner cushion. Where Anthony stood behind her once, rubbing her shoulders while laughing about his quarterback's injury. I didn't want to catch anything. That's the strange part. I just wanted to confirm that the unease wasn't mine alone. That the house was as tense as it felt. She noticed I was more withdrawn. Asked if work was heavy. I said yes. She offered a massage. I declined. The distance between us wasn't physical yet. But it was growing, and I didn't want to reach for a hand that might have already touched someone else that same night. So I waited, let the tape roll, and for the first time in our marriage, I felt like a guest in my own home. A man waiting not for evidence, but for the courage to look at it once it arrived. And I knew it was coming. The kind of knowing that crawls up your spine and refuses to leave. The kind of knowing that doesn't need confirmation. But I would get it anyway. Because no matter how strong the suspicion, it's the truth that sets the boundary. And I was preparing to draw mine. There was something cruelly poetic about her suggesting I host game night on my birthday. She asked with a kind of brightness that felt too practiced. Let's make it special this time, she said, placing her hand on my shoulder. Everyone's expecting it. It's your birthday, after all. I nodded, smiled, said nothing, but inside, I had already decided this would be the last game night I'd ever host. Not out of anger, out of closure. The days leading up to it felt surreal. I moved through them like an actor hitting marks on a stage he'd already mapped out in his head. I shopped for snacks, bought beer, cleaned the house, rearranged the furniture just enough to feel like something was shifting. She buzzed with energy, tried on 2 outfits the day of, settled on the navy dress, the one with the slit too high for casual company, but just subtle enough to go unchallenged. I said nothing. Do you want help with the wings? She asked. I've got it, I said. She kissed me on the cheek. Lingered longer than usual. I stood still. At 7 sharp, the guys started showing up. Ben first, as always. Then Curtis. Then Anthony. They brought 6-packs. Chip bags. That same loud laughter they always did. The familiarity would have felt comforting once. Now it felt rehearsed. They sat in the same places. Curtis to the left of the coffee table. Ben in the corner cushion. Anthony perched on the armrest until someone forced him off. She brought out the snacks. Placed bowls down like offerings. Her laughter rang just slightly louder than usual. She touched Curtis's arm as she passed him a napkin. Anthony brushed her waist as he reached for salsa. Ben gave her a wink when she refilled his drink. They thought it was a performance they still controlled. They had no idea the scene had already changed. Halfway through the first quarter, they all opened their laptops, ready to check rosters, adjust lineups, and prepare for the next round of smack talk. That's when I stood. Slowly, deliberately. The room quieted, just slightly, enough to register the shift. I walked to the kitchen counter, picked up 3 white envelopes, walked back to the table, placed one in front of Curtis, one in front of Anthony, one in front of Ben. No one moved, no one said a word. "What's this?" Ben asked, already reaching. "Birthday cards," Curtis joked, a nervous laugh cracking his voice. I didn't answer. Anthony opened his first. His smile dropped before his fingers stopped moving. Curtis followed, then Ben. Inside each envelope, a stack of screenshots. Printouts of text threads, cropped stills from video footage. Each page timestamped. Each message annotated only by the truth they had all chosen to ignore. He's always distracted with football anyway. I watched their eyes scan line by line. Watched their shoulders fold inward. Their mouths press shut. Ben leaned back. Curtis set the papers down like they were burning his hands. Anthony didn't look up at all. She froze in the kitchen doorway, still holding the tray of sliders. Her smile, the one she'd been wearing all evening, flickered. Disintegrated. She didn't speak, neither did I. I looked at her, looked at them, then I said, "Happy birthday" to me, and I walked out the front door. No one followed. The air outside was cold. Quiet. I breathed it in like I'd never tasted air before. Inside, I could imagine the murmurs beginning, the justifications forming, the fragments of denial and shame floating in the silence I'd left behind. But they weren't my responsibility anymore. I had set the table, laid out the truth. And in that moment, I didn't need closure, I didn't need confrontation, I didn't need an apology. I needed distance. And that's exactly what I gave myself. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is deliver the truth, and leave before anyone can rewrite it. For 2 nights after the birthday game night, I stayed at a hotel off the highway. Not because I needed luxury. Not because I wanted to escape the city. I just needed a room where no one had ever lied to me. A bed where no one had touched anyone else. A space where silence wasn't suspicious. The hotel was plain, white walls, beige carpet, a television I never turned on. I slept with the window open. Even though the noise from the highway crept in, I needed to hear something constant. Something that didn't pretend to care. I didn't text her. She didn't text me. When I returned home on the 3rd day, the house was quiet, empty. Her keys were gone. Her closet stripped. The coffee mug she always used, gone from the dish rack. Not a note, not a voicemail, just absence. And strangely, that was mercy. I stood in the entryway for a long time, breathing in the stillness, the kind of silence that only comes after detonation, after everyone's walked away from the crater. The living room looked exactly the same. But I wasn't fooled. The betrayal wasn't in the decor. It was in the weight of memory pressed into every inch of that space. The couch had teeth now. The rug was soaked in old laughter I didn't trust anymore. The table, my table, felt like it still held the weight of 3 envelopes. And the silence that followed. I started cleaning. Not the kind of cleaning you do when company's coming. The kind you do when you're trying to erase ghosts. I took the cushions off the couch. Hauled the whole thing out to the curb without thinking twice. The table went next. The chairs. The blanket she used when we watched movies. I replaced the Wi-Fi router. Bought a new cutting board. Replaced every coffee mug. I even changed the router password, the last thing that tethered her presence to the walls. It wasn't rage. It was survival. Some people burn the house down. I changed the locks. One of them texted me 2 days later. Curtis. Man, I'm sorry, I was stupid. I don't even know what to say. I read it once, deleted it. Ben blocked me, whether out of shame or avoidance. I'll never know. Anthony, he said nothing. Radio silence. Which, in some ways, was the loudest response. I didn't chase any of them. Didn't ask why. Didn't scream into the void for answers I already had. Because when someone looks you in the eye, eats your food, laughs at your jokes, then turns around and sleeps with the woman you love, there's nothing they can say that matters. So I cleared them all. Deleted the Fantasy League app. Shut down the group thread. Not because I hated the game. I still loved the game. But the game had been tainted by the players. And I couldn't sit through another draft imagining who else had been in my house for the wrong reasons. Every time I opened my fridge, I remembered who had handed me a beer. Every pizza box I touched, I remembered who had chosen the toppings. The mundane had become radioactive. So I started over. New couch, new table, new rules. I didn't host anymore, not for a while. If people asked, I said I was taking a break. What I meant was, I no longer trusted people to sit in my home and keep their hands to themselves. It wasn't cynicism, it was clarity. Sometimes, cleaning up isn't about dust or dishes. It's about removing the weight of what was allowed to grow in silence. And when I looked at that empty room, stripped down to floorboards and fresh air, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Control, not revenge, just agency, and that was enough. I used to believe home meant safety. That once you shut the door behind you, the outside world, the noise, the stress, the unpredictability, stayed out there. That what existed within those four walls was sacred, familiar, yours. But betrayal doesn't knock on the front door. It laughs with your friends. It clinks bottles during toasts. It leans in during a joke and whispers something only two people are supposed to hear. It lingers on couches and walks barefoot through your kitchen. And then it kisses your wife goodnight while you're setting up the next game night roster. The mistake wasn't trusting them. The mistake was assuming trust was a given. You think loyalty is the default in close proximity. That proximity breeds protection. That being under the same roof creates boundaries. It doesn't. If anything, it gives betrayal a shorter walk. I thought the living room was ours. The place we built together. The place where she laughed at my fantasy losses and massaged my shoulders when my QB tore his ACL. The place where my friends felt welcome. Where we passed around beers like communion. And shared cheap pizza like it was some sacred meal. But what I didn't realize is that I had invited them in too far. Not just into the house. Into my blind spot. I mistook their presence for proof of loyalty. I mistook casual jokes and clinks of drinks for something deeper than what they ever intended. They were never my brothers. They were opportunists. And she wasn't just my wife. She was a mirror I didn't know was two-way. I lost more than a relationship. I lost the assumption that the people closest to you won't touch what's yours. But here's what I've learned. Trust is not default. It is earned, kept, nurtured. It is not a passive thing that floats between people. It's built, brick by brick, with choices. And once one person stops building, the entire structure leans. Eventually, it falls. I used to think love was enough. That shared routines and inside jokes and memories were some kind of armor. But betrayal doesn't care about memories. It cares about opportunity. And I gave them all the opportunity they needed when I opened my door. Week after week, and set the table for people who didn't value the seat they were given. That night, the last game night, I watched three men, whom I'd laughed with for years, sit in stunned silence as the truth landed like a grenade on the coffee table. I didn't scream, didn't demand they explain themselves. Because there was nothing they could say that would make sense. When someone eats at your table and then crawls into your bed the moment you leave the room, they've already told you everything you need to know. So I left them with the evidence. And walked away, not from her, not from them, but from the idea that closeness equals character. It doesn't. Character is revealed when the room is quiet. And the door is unlocked. And no one's watching. And now, I watch differently, not with paranoia, but with precision. I listen longer, I ask twice, I measure actions, not words. Because what I learned wasn't how easy it is to be betrayed. What I learned is how easily we train ourselves not to see it. We excuse glances, we laugh off gifts, we explain away tension as coincidence. We write scripts that make us comfortable, and we force everyone else to read them, until they don't, and then the real story starts. She slept with 3 men in my fantasy league, then asked me to host game night. And I did, because I needed them all in one room, one setting, one truth. I didn't lose her. I lost the illusion that the people I called friends were capable of being loyal when it wasn't convenient. And that's a gift, not a pleasant one, but a gift all the same. Because now, when I build something, whether it's a new league, a new home, or a new relationship, I know what questions to ask. I know which red flags don't need context. And I know that trust isn't something you hand out at the door with a drink and a smile. It's something you guard, until it's earned. So if you're ever sitting across from someone, wondering if they see you or just the space they want to occupy, ask yourself, did I invite them into my life? Or did I just leave the door open long enough for them to walk in? Because the worst betrayals don't come from enemies. They come from the people who know where the glasses are kept. And still drink from yours. That's the lesson. Don't invite betrayal to dinner. And act surprised when it eats before you do.